Hello, welcome everyone. We're going to speak about, hopefully a short topic today, about the fast of Asarah B'Teves, the 10th of Teves, which is coming up in a couple of days, in fact tomorrow night. The reason, these are one of the 4 fasts which we fast in the year in commemoration or corresponding to the destruction of the first temple and also the second temple to an extent. But mainly the first temple. The first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar, about the year, must have been about the year 490 or something like that, BCE, approximately. I think the non-Jewish historians date it a bit earlier, but it's a whole discussion why they got it wrong. Of course, we've got very precise calendar and records. The 4 fasts start off with this one, the 10th of Teves, the 10th month of the year, which is Teves. It's a month which Chanukah finishes in. Chanukah is the only festival which spans 2 different months. It's the end of Kislev, the beginning of Teves, and just a week after Chanukah, to get rid of all the donuts which we eat. We put on a bit of weight, so we get to lose it a bit with the fast. But seriously, what's the idea of this fast? It's the beginning of the 4 fasts, basically. What happened on the 10th of Teves, about 3 years before the destruction of the first temple? The Babylonians surrounded the city of Jerusalem. Right, it was a walled city, and they trapped it. Basically, they surrounded it, and they started besieging the city. Right, and either 2.5 or 3.5 years later, on the 17th of Tammuz, they breached the walls finally, and 3 weeks later they actually destroyed the first temple. And we've given extensive lectures on those 2 fast days, the 3 weeks it's called. Remember the 22 days of the 3 weeks, the 22 letters of the Aleph base. And then finally, many years later, after the Jews had been exiled to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar, there was a remnant in the land of Israel, led by someone called Gedaliah ben Achikom. Gedaliah was the leader of the remnants there, and there was an uprising against him by someone called Shimon ben Nasina. I think that's what his name was. Right, it's at the end of the book of Jeremiah, if you want to look it up, right near the end there. And he basically, Gedaliah didn't suspect. He didn't accept Lashon Hara. Someone actually warned him, but Gedaliah said, "You're not allowed to listen to Lashon Hara. You're not allowed to believe Lashon Hara, gossip or slander." But we know the law is that we actually learn from this case that you're allowed to believe it to the extent that you can take precautions. But he wanted to go beyond the letter of the law and say, "No, I don't believe it at all. You're speaking lies about this Yishmael. He's a good Jew." And unfortunately, this was a rebellion, and unfortunately, because of that, Gedaliah was appointed by the Babylonians to take care of the land of Israel. And once they heard that, they took it as a rebellion, and that was the end of the remnants. And then all the Jews were effectively banished from the land of Israel. I think it was for 52 years, I think, or something like that. Okay. So what's the idea? Why do we have 3? And because of that, we fast. And this actually happened on Rosh Hashanah. And we would have had a fast day on Rosh Hashanah, but obviously you can't. It's the first day of the year. It's a festival. So we push it on to the 3rd day of Tishri, which is the first non-festival, because Rosh Hashanah is for 2 days. So we celebrate the fast day of Gedaliah. It's called Tzom Gedaliah on the 3rd day. And the verses, they speak about the fast of the 4th, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, and fast of the 10th, referring to the months they're in. The first fast of the 4th is the fast of Tammuz, Shiva Asarah B'Teves, the 17th of Tammuz. The fast of the 5th, that's the destruction itself, the 9th of Av. The fast of the 7th, that's the fast in Tishri, the 7th month, which is we celebrate the day after Rosh Hashanah. and the fast of the 10th, which is the month we're in now. So we explained some great significance to do with the 17th, the fast of 17th of Tammuz. We explained there it was the destruction of the luchos, the tablets which we got at Sinai, right? They were broken on the 17th of Tammuz. We explained that it's the idea of the destruction of the 10 Commandments themselves. That means the 10 Commandments should have been a permanent feature in reality, in the physical reality, since once God gave the Torah and spoke to the Jewish people at Sinai, and that created a permanent imprint of God's presence in the world. But they've said, and that reality should have penetrated to the nth degree. It should be absolutely permanent. It should never even weaken. On Asarah B'Teves, we saw that because of the terrible sin of the golden calf, some of the Jewish people worshipped the golden calf just before receiving the luchos, the tablets with the 10 Commandments written on them. They created a rift between us and God, and we kind of pushed God out of the picture enough that now the tablets can be broken. And that's indeed what happened. Moses came down the mountain with the tablets, with the 10 Commandments, and the rest is history. He smashed them at the bottom of the thing, and then we have and then we explained that all the 5 tragedies which happened on the 17th of Tammuz were related to this idea of the destruction of different aspects of the Asarah B'Teves, the Torah, that testimony which God revealed himself in this world through 10 Commandments, through different forms. Have a look at that lecture. That's a beautiful lecture. Not my ideas, that's why I can say it's beautiful, right? And then we have Tisha B'Av. We went into this in very great detail, a number of lectures. Also, that lecture of the 5 things which happened on Tisha B'Av, the same lecture as the 5 things which happened on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. We said that's the idea of the destruction of the place where God can be revealed. That means the physical realm. That means the land of Israel. So we were exiled out of the land of Israel. It was a temple, so the temple was destroyed, right? All the places where God's presence can be revealed in this world, there is destruction from the receiving end, so to speak, the place, right? So, but what is then Sem Gedalia? I'm not sure, to be honest, what any deeper significant ideas are. It's interesting it happened on Rosh Hashanah. It represents the end of the whole process of destruction. It's the final nail in the coffin of the destruction, where we don't have any presence at all in the land of Israel. So it's an absolute loss of place for the Jewish people. We don't have a place anymore. Right, let's have a look at Asarah B'Teves. Very interesting Asarah B'Teves. The 10th of Teves, they surrounded the city. That doesn't sound like it's such a tragic, event. It was the beginning of the end, right? But I can understand the breaching of the walls on the 17th of Tammuz. We explained the deeper meaning there. It's the idea of the protection which is given to the Torah, to the Shekhinah, to the divine presence, which was the temple. That got breached. There's no protection anymore, right? But here, what's the idea of just the mere fact that they besieged the land of Israel, or the land of the city of Jerusalem? The siege itself is a tragedy. Very interesting. We have a whole fast day just dedicated to that. And it's put on par with those other 3 very serious, very significant fasts. Okay, if we have a look in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, in Orach Chaim, that's the main one which people learn. There's 4 parts of the Code of Jewish Law. Orach Chaim is the one which deals with daily living, laws of blessings, prayers, the Sabbath, the Yomim Tovim, the festivals. And there's a section which speaks about fast days. And as part of that section, there's a certain days in the year which are not ordained fast days, But if a person wants to fast, he wants to be stringent upon himself, wants to take upon himself something which he doesn't have to, but these are fitting days to fast, because bad things did happen on them, but they weren't so bad that it was a mandated fast for all the Jewish people. So, as part of the list, it says, B'Shmoina B'Teves, Nichtav HaTorah, that this was today actually, on the 8th of Teves, the Torah was written Yevonis in Greek. Be made Talmai HaMelech in the days of Talmai the king. And there's darkness in the world for 3 days. Interesting. What are these 3 days? Right? These 3 days would be the 8th of Tammuz, the 8th of Teves, 9th of Teves, and the 10th of Teves. Right, the 10th of Teves. Now, of course, the 10th of Teves was already a sad day because it commemorated a past event, right? Because this event of what's called the writing of the Septuagint. It's not the Septuagint we have now. It's the Septuagint which is now is written much later. But this is the original writing down of the Torah into another language, a translation of the Torah into another language. So this Talmai HaMelech, this Greek king, was Egyptian king, but it's from the Greek Empire. He commanded 70 Jewish sages. He put them in 70 different rooms, and he said, translate the Torah. He did this in order to corroborate, to make sure that if one of them was like mistranslating something, then, so this person wouldn't think of the same mistranslation, so I can, line them up next to each other and we can see if anyone's been doing anything dodgy with the translations. But a miracle happened that all of them changed a number of things. They translated a few different things in order that the non-Jewish reader would not get the wrong idea. For example, the first one was Bereshis Bor Elokim. In the beginning, Bara, he created Elokim, God. So in Hebrew, the verb comes before the noun or the proper noun, the person, right? So if I say Johnny ate something, right? You can say that Johnny ochal, he ate, but you can also say ochal Johnny, right? Johnny ate, right? It means he ate, who ate? Johnny, right? So Bereshis, in the beginning, Borei Elokim, God created, right? But you can read it, translate it literally, Bereshis, which means in the beginning, whatever that means. Bora, he created. What did he create? Elokim, God. Right? Of course we know the name Elokim. God there is referring to a certain aspect of the way God interacts with the world. But still, it looks to the untrained ear, people who are very crude thinkers, it looks like, Elokim means God himself, right? Not realizing there's many names for God, and they're all focused on different ways that God reveals himself to the world. Sometimes he reveals himself as a just judge, that's Elokim, as someone who, as a being who hides behind a mask, that's Elokim, that's a mask of creation. You got the name Yukevovke Havai, that's the name which represents God's ultimate reality, that he's beyond time. He's the one who makes everything, who brings everything into being, right, etc. So they translated it like this. Instead of saying Bereshis Bore Elokim, they translate it into whatever language it was. Into Greek, Elokim Bore Bereshis, God created in the beginning, right? And they did that a number of times throughout the verses in the Torah. They only translated the first 5 books. And it's called the Septuagint, I guess, because Septuagint is 70, I guess. It's translated by the 70 sages. Right. So, miraculously, they all thought of exactly the same amendments in the translation. Right? But at the end of the day, this was a bad thing. We're going to see why it's a bad thing. Why is the translation of the Torah a bad thing? And there was darkness in the world for 3 days. So that means it started on the 8th and finished on the 10th, which was Asarah B'Teves, which a couple of 100 years earlier, 150 years earlier, something like that. The 10th of Teves is when the city of Jerusalem was surrounded by the Babylonians. So is there a connection there? Then there happened, amazingly, in the whole long list here, you've got 3 days in a row where it should be a fast day. The 8th of Teves, because of the translation of the Torah into Greek. The 9th of Teves, so the Tesbo, lo noida ezohi hatzorah she'eraboy. Fascinating. The 9th of Teves, it's a good day to fast, but it's not known what tragedy happened on the 9th. Very surprising. It's the only one on the list. The other ones, it says the 1st of Nisan, the children of Aaron died, the 2 of the children of Aaron. The 10th of Nisan, Miriam, the prophetess, died. Right? It says it goes through a whole long list. Right? When it comes to this one, you've got the 8th, they translate the 9th, we don't know what happened, but it's a good day to fast as well. And it doesn't mention the 10th, because the 10th is actually a mandated fast, Asarah B'Teves, which you mentioned before, because they surrounded the walls of Jerusalem. So what's the idea? What's the connection between these 3 fasts? What's the idea of the darkness coming down into the world? What's darkness got to do with it? Right? There's a physical darkness came down into the world. Sounds like it was a physical darkness. Yeah. Right? Because it only happened for 3 days. So it seems to be a precise thing which happened. Okay. And what was this thing which happened on the 9th? So there's 2 opinions actually which I've seen, maybe more, which explain what tragedy happened on the 9th. One of them is Ezra was killed. Not killed, he died. Ezra was the head of the men of the Great Assembly. He was the one who led the Jewish people through the first exile, the Babylonian exile. He's the one who helped the Jewish people transition from the world of prophecy to the world of chachamim, of sages. Right? We spoke about this in Chanukah many times before. On Purim we spoke about this. So the fact that he died, okay, he was the one who guided the Jewish people through this time of transition, you could say, from light to darkness, right? We explained that Chanukah is the idea of darkness, but the idea of the darkness itself brings forth a new light, but that light is a permanent light, which doesn't depend on God's external revealing his light into the world, right? That God's saying, I'm going to pull myself out of the picture and we're going to see what happens, and I'm still there behind the scenes. That means despite the fact that the Greeks are in charge and they're destroying the Jewish people spiritually, I can still give a miracle in the middle of it, right? The Maccabees, Matisiah and his 5 sons, they fought back against the Greek occupation, and there were 3 of them for 180 years, even though there were still battles going on, and they got killed themselves not too long after, right? But even so, God has said, this battle is not a natural battle. You won it because I made it happen. And you don't need to have an open miracle reality in order to see my power. I can destroy evil. I can dominate evil even in the background. When the evil itself thinks it's winning, I'm still manipulating everything. Like the Purim story, we saw that much clearer as well. But the Chanukah story is saying, even when we don't see it, God's still there. And that's why God gave us a tiny hint that this was a miracle by making the candles burn for 8 days, when they should have only burnt for 1 day. That's what the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the transition was there. Transitioning from that world of prophecy, where God's relationship with us was open, right? There was open miracles in the time of the temple. The 10 miracles which were constant in the temple, right? Even if it was raining, it would never extinguish the fire on the altar, right? The smoke which would come out from the wood which is burning on the mizbeach, on the altar, even if it was windy, it would not bend it, right? A miracle happened that sometimes at at the end of one of the festivals, the smoke did bend, but it didn't disperse. It kind of went like that to show everyone what the year was going to be like. Is it going to be easterly wind this year or northerly wind? Each one represents different types of abundance or famine, which was going to come in the coming year, right? But even when the wind did blow it, it was in a straight line. The smoke was going like that in a straight line diagonally, right? So we had those open miracles then in the temple. When the temple was destroyed, we didn't have those open miracles anymore, right? We didn't have prophecy anymore. Prophecy is a state of being where people are totally aware of God. We didn't have that anymore. We plunged into darkness, a world of darkness. We don't have the miracles anymore. But God's saying, even in the world where there's no open miracles, I'm still here. And that takes us through the last 2,000 years. That despite the fact that it looks like this world is very, very dominated by forces of evil and negativity and the forces of nature, there doesn't seem to be, it looks like God's just left the world. But we know there's a very silent candle, but a very clear one burning in the darkness. The fact that the Jewish people have survived for so long through the exiles. Yeah. That itself is one of the greatest miracles, but it's so subtle that people overlook it. Right? If you think that logically makes sense, we had a whole lecture about proving the divinity of the Torah and the existence of God from anti-Semitism, which is one element of this, right? Anti-Semitism itself, but the fact that the Jewish people survive is also a miracle. It really is an open miracle, but because all the individual elements can be explained by nature, so therefore it doesn't look like a miracle. But if you look at it in terms of the whole of history of mankind, there's nothing which can explain rationally why the Jewish people not just survive through the centuries, but they thrive despite the fact that they've got no rational reason to survive, right? If they had their own nation, their own state, and they grew stronger, right? You understand? Yes, because of physical strength, military genius, but that didn't happen in many places. Many places, for most places through the last couple of thousand years, the Jewish people being downtrodden, they were second-class citizens, they've been persecuted, exiled from one place to the other. Right? It doesn't make sense how they could even just remember the Torah or just stay loyal to their traditions even. But on the contrary, it's solidly intact and we're thriving. We're thriving despite the fact that there's so many negative influences. That itself is God saying, I'm in charge. You're completely in the darkness, but I'm going to show you the Jewish people. My promise is Jewish people will always thrive. They'll always keep the Torah. And won't be forgotten. They'll always be, despite every nation, every generation, there is some sort of nation or leader who tries to wipe out all the Jews. Doesn't matter. And they can be the most powerful in the world, they still won't succeed. Amazing. So that's the idea of Chanukah, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the Men of Great Assembly, which is led by Ezra. He's the one who took the Jewish people who were living in a state of prophecy, and he helped them transition so that you don't need prophecy anymore. You think the only way that you can know God is like if God's literally holding your hand, like a child. A child needs to have his parents holding his hand, or at least when he walks off and gets a bit more mature, you've got an invisible leash for children. They can walk far away from the parents, but they're always, when they get so far, they'll sense and they'll look back just to make sure the parents are there. Okay, parents are there. I'll keep walking a bit more. But they don't see the parents. They panic and they try looking, right? It's a sign of immaturity to need God to hold our hand, right, and have open miracles the whole time. God wants us to grow up. He wants us to become mature, to stand on our own 2 feet. So God said, okay, ready? Okay, I think it's the time I can go now, right? Let's see how you manage. Temple destroyed. No more Shekhinah, no more divine presence. I'll give you a second temple. The second temple is the idea that just to tell you, you're going off, you're going to a faraway country, I'm going to a faraway country, we're going to be very distant for a long time now, but I'm going to trust you, but I want to tell you, I want to give you a message that despite the fact that I'm going to be far away, I'm always really here. Right? I've got my spies watching you. I could be like in a place where you wouldn't expect it, just watching you, where you think you're all alone. I'm here, don't worry. Right? That's the Chanukah candles. Right? Even in the darkness, we think, oh, God's left us. He's still here. That's what Anshe Knesset Gedolim, and primarily Ezra, that's what he taught us. That even though we don't see God's might anymore, right, or His awesomeness, the temple's destroyed, the Jewish people are in exile. That's why some of the prophets wanted to stop saying Hakel HaGodol HaGibor V'Hanora, the God who's great and mighty and awesome, right? How can we call Him awesome? How can we call Him mighty? He's letting his children get downtrodden and abused by the nations. How can you call that mighty or awesome anymore? But Ezra said, no, you're missing the point, right? That's how a child thinks. A child thinks, wow, my daddy's so strong, yeah? I feel so powerful. Yeah, there's a dog come towards me, my daddy shoos away the dog. And then say, dog's coming, and daddy's gone. He's gone, I'm vulnerable to the dog. Right? But the dog, and he thinks he's going to get attacked by the dog, and for some reason the dog just gets distracted and walks away. That's strange. Alright. Why was that? My father wasn't there to protect me this time. So he's learning, 1 minute. Maybe all the lessons which my father taught me while he was still with me, maybe he's taught me to not be scared of the dog, or whatever technique it was. That's how the dog is. So my father is still protecting me, either through the fact that he's imbued certain lessons and certain power within me, so I'm a living continuation of my father. So therefore, even though God's out the picture, so to speak, in an open sense, He's still with us, because He's taught us the Torah. He's taught us how to connect with the Torah and to keep going, despite the fact that new situations come up, people are forgetting different laws, we can derive them again. We know the tools. So whatever happens to the Jewish people, we've always got a way of reconnecting, right? So God's here with us in the exiles, right? He's protecting us despite the fact that we're in exile in the nations. That's what Ezra taught us. The men of the Great Assembly. Why it's called the Great Assembly? Because they returned God's crown to its previous great state, right? So now we can say Hakel in the daily Shemon Esrei prayer. We say every day Hakel, the God, Hagodol, the great one, Hagibor, the mighty one, V'Hanora, right? Right? He's mighty because he can hold himself back and see his children be downtrodden. But yet, V'Hanora is awesome, the fact that He's always still on the world, even though it's not open anymore. The fact that the non-Jews try to destroy us, or we don't see any divine intervention, but yet somehow we're still surviving. So either because He's given us the tools, that He's living, so to speak, through the Jewish people now, right? Or it's just that God's intervening in such a hidden way where we just don't know, right? So in the analogy, it would be like the father leaves the son. He teaches him a few techniques. If you put your shoulders back like that, the dog will not see you as weak, or whatever, right? He won't attack you. Or he'll teach you to always wear, certain coloured clothes, because he knows that when dogs attack, they'll get distracted by the clothes, and then they'll forget what they're doing, and then they'll just mildly walk away, right? Or it could be that the father's actually just across he's got binoculars out there, and in a couple of 100 meters away, and he's actually got like one of these sonic dog controllers, and that's where the dog was about to attack. He just took out his sound weapon or whatever, and it beep, it's sort of a hypersonic frequency, and the dog got a shock and he went away. Oh God, you're still looking after us even though I can't see you anymore. That's the idea. That's what Ezra taught us. That's the idea of all these 3 days. These 3 days are days where there's a constriction. That's how I want to put it. Where God's light beforehand, in different formations or different setups, God's light was open and clear to us. So, for example, you had the light of the temple, it exuded until Jerusalem, the walls of Jerusalem, and then it burst out. The light of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence, spread out to the whole world outside the land of Jerusalem, the very holy city. Right within the walls of the city, it had a certain aspect of holiness which the temple had. It was sort of slightly diluted, but it was still considered a holy place inside the land of Jerusalem. And that holiness, that sort of nucleus of the world's spirituality, was contained within Jerusalem. Because from Zion, Torah comes out, and the word of Hashem, of God, comes from Yerushalayim, from Jerusalem. That's the light coming out from Jerusalem to the world. The world was still a place which believed in God, right? Even though there was corruptions of that, we had idolatry, but the world was still being influenced heavily by the light of Jerusalem going out to the world. When the Babylonians represent the Ruach, it's the idea of the autonomous self. So they say, no, don't worry about God's light, yeah? Look at yourself, all right? Let's be selfish, right? Idolatry, right? That's the idea of free will. What is the ultimate free will? The free will to believe in God or to believe in yourself, right? So to an extent that started with Babylon, right? That's why the Babylon, we see the idea of idolatry. One of the tests in the exile of Babylon was to bow down to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. He made a whole statue of himself. He was an extremely arrogant person, right? He was the one who conquered the world, right? He took a lion. He was able to ride a lion and have a crown of a snake on his head, showing the mastery of a creation, of the animal kingdom to the ultimate degree. That's the idea of the Golus Bovel. This is Rabbi Jeremy Kagan's got a very, very good book called The Jewish Self. And he goes through all these different, the 4 exiles show how they correspond to different souls of the Jewish people. Right, we spoke about the 4 souls before. You've got the transcendent soul, you've got the intellectual soul, the emotional soul, or the autonomous self soul, the one where you feel, who are you? You point to your heart. And then you've got the physical soul. Excuse me. And those correspond to the 4 exiles. The physical soul corresponds to Persia, where we went after the physical element. We went to the feast of Achashverosh, which we shouldn't have. Yevonim, the Chanukah story is the mind, where the Greeks showed philosophy and intellect to the world, and we believe that the intellect, even though it's the most spiritual part of the human condition, it should be subjugated and subordinate to a higher spiritual reality. Only use our intellect as a tool to bring out spirituality in this world, which is the whole lesson of Ezra and the Chanukah story, right? But using the physical to reveal God, without having to go up there to have prophecy. Whereas a Bovel corresponded to the Ruach, and I think the idea is the Ruach is an autonomous self. It's the idea of the negation of the idea that our reality is really rooted in the higher realms, right? In the spiritual worlds. That's where our real self is. Whereas down here we start to feel that no, reality is here. That starts with Bovel. That's shutting, that's constricting God's light. That's what Babel did. We're taking Jerusalem, we're surrounding the walls of Jerusalem where the light can't come out anymore. The idea of constriction. Take the light, stop it expanding. That's why we fast on the 10th of Teves. Because the surrounding of the walls. It was the beginning of darkness coming into the world. Darkness being the hiding of light. On the 8th of Teves, what do we see? We see the translation of Lashon HaKodesh, the Holy Tongue, into Greek. We've spoken about the difference between the Jewish people and the Greek many times before. This is represented in the languages. The Lashon HaKodesh, the Holy Tongue, Hebrew, is a language which God used to create the world. So it's a language where you can see God's hand in the physical world, if you know how to trace it back. It's a language which at its root is a sublime spiritual reality. Each letter is not just mere markings on a paper. They're concepts, and those concepts are rooted in divine light. Right? When they get filtered through all the different dimensions, which are successively more and more physical, then the letters start to take a more physical form. But at the roots, these are spiritual and conceptual realities. Right? Concepts meaning, the way we look at concepts is that they are real. Concepts are more real than the physical manifestations of the concepts. Right? We explained what's more real, the chair I'm sitting on or the concept of a chair? The concept of the chair is more real because this chair, there was one point in time it never existed, and there'll probably be a time once it gets worn out and maybe broken up in a rubbish tip somewhere where it will cease to exist. Whereas the concept of a chair has not been affected an iota by any chairs existing or not existing in the physical dimension. That's what Lashon HaKodesh is, the Hebrew language. It's a spiritual light of God which imbues the physical world with reality. Everything comes from that language. God said the word, oh, light, and light became the letters themselves crystallized into what we call light. That's how the structure of reality works. That's the idea of the chapter, was it chapter 11? I think chapter 11 in Genesis, we gave a whole lecture about that there. I think it was chapter 11. About Torah. That's the difference between the Jewish language and the 70 languages. Especially Greek. Why Greek? Greek is also a special language. The letters themselves do have a relationship with the objects they're describing, but they only map on to external elements of that reality. So if it's a chair, it will be, I don't know the Greek word of chair, what it would be, but the idea is that the Greek word for chair would describe the idea of, something which supports someone sitting and it's got something flat and legs, whatever, whereas the Hebrew word for chair would go more into the spiritual roots, the purpose of the chair in terms of God's plan for the world and things like that. Right? It wouldn't just be on the superficial aspect of the chair, it would be every element of the chair will be represented in the Hebrew word kisei, kaf samach aleph, the word for chair in Hebrew. So when you take Torah is a blueprint of all of creation. one word is the blueprint of all the relevant objects which are associated with that word. For example, kisei, the word kisei, kaf samach aleph, meaning chair, is the paradigm, the archetype from which all chairs come from. They're just physical manifestations and variations of that concept. The world itself, the whole of creation, is just a physical extrapolation of the Torah, the words of the Torah, the 300 and whatever it is, 1,000 letters of the Torah. So when you translate Torah, you're taking this light, this infinite light, which is meant to express itself boundlessly into this world, and you're constricting it and say, no. Forget that extra light bit. Let's just focus on the translation itself. Without, and by doing so, we lose that connection to the higher, more profound aspect of the language. That's why there was darkness in the world. Once the sages translated the holy language, that language through which we can trace our reality back to God himself, through the Torah, they took that away. They revealed, no, just translate the Torah. We're only interested in the translation, not how it's relevant to us here. Doesn't matter anything which is beyond this world. Let's say, ideas, very interesting concepts to do with kisei, chair. What's the idea of a chair? How does the chair tie in with God's ultimate purpose of creation? No. Don't concern yourself with that. Limit it. Limit the light of the Hebrew language to the 70 languages, to Greek, or ultimately the 70 languages, which is the number of nature. Number 7 is nature, 70 languages. The 70 sages. That's what Talmud was trying to do. He's trying to get the sages, these 70 sages, to give over that spiritual reality to the physical world. And now we can cut out the spiritual part. And that's why, so we now see the connection between all these three tragedies which happened on the 8th, 9th and 10th of Teves. The 8th of Teves, the language of light was constricted. The way that God expresses his light into the world through the holy language, through Lashon HaKodesh, through Hebrew, was now constricted. Hebrew is now translatable. It's something which we can understand on a physical level. So maybe Hebrew is just another physical language. You've lost everything. It's not just they lost the meaning of the Hebrew words. There's a transformation of Hebrew itself is becoming a language. It's just another language now. Clouded in darkness. Right? It can be translated. What does translation mean? We've got this thing, there's an equivalent. Equalness. Right? Just you could translate from Hebrew to Greek or Greek to Hebrew. It's a language just like any other now. It's not a transcendent language. It's not categorically different. That's the tragedy of the 8th of Teves. 9th of Teves, Ezra was the one who was able to show God's light within the human mind. That's through Torah, through learning Torah. He's the one who presided over the transition from prophecy to sages reaching up to God through the physical, through the darkness. Right? So when he died, a certain element of that, his teachings, who showed us how to still connect to God, despite the fact that we're in the darkness, he died. So a certain element of that went away, right? Because we're by ourselves now. We don't have a teacher anymore to teach us how to, in the example of the father who abandons the son and the dog's coming towards him. Maybe the father said, "Okay, quick." He left his one of his servants, to look after the son while the father's gone. So okay, but my father's gone. Thanks, Jeeves, the waiter, right, the butler, right. Thanks, Jeeves, for protecting me there, right. Okay, fine. Okay, can you explain how was I? How did you do that? Oh, you control the dog by you have to stand up with your shoulders back. Okay, fine. You have to stare it down in the eyes. Make sure the dog doesn't. Okay, got it. Thanks for telling me. And then Jeeves is gone. Okay. I hope we learned the lessons right, because we're literally by ourselves now. That's the end of this Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the men of the Great Assembly who taught us how to see God in the darkness. Now we actually go into the darkness, where the light is actually hidden now, and now we've really got to do it through our own efforts and struggle against with all the tests without having a helping hand anymore, at least not openly. And then finally we got the idea of the constriction of the light coming from Jerusalem, the light of the Torah, the light of the divine presence which was in Jerusalem, spreading to the world. That gets constricted as well. That's why all these three tragedies, right, one day after the other, the 8th, the 9th, the 10th. Right? Really, it's fitting to fast on all three. Obviously, if a person can fast for 3 days, no, everyone can. But these are three tragedies, and they're all the same theme. That's why when the Torah was translated into Greek, the world was dark for 3 days. Because these 3 days, for whatever reason, the spiritual reality of these 3 days has to do with the idea of constriction of light and not letting the light go out. Darkness overpowering light. Now, that might sound very depressing, but remember, as we mentioned earlier today, that's the whole message of Chanukah. That it's not despite the darkness we'll still be able to find light. There's a new light which can be found because of the darkness. That means we get, for example, a higher realization of God's power and control of the world, that he doesn't have to be doing open miracles to make the Jewish people survive. He can make us go into exile and seemingly keep quiet while all the enemies of the Jewish people are doing what they will with them, God forbid. God says, don't worry, it's all going to be for the best. It's all part of your purification process. You'll understand in the end, but just have faith that this is what's happening to you now. When the Jewish people stick with God, despite the fact that it's uncomfortable, despite the fact that God seems to have abandoned us, that reveals a much deeper connection between the Jewish people and God. Obviously, the Jewish people at the time when the temple was there and they had the open miracles happening in the temple, and you have prophecy. Obviously, what are you going to choose? You're going to choose to abandon a direct connection with God, where you feel the ecstasy of being close to God through prophecy, or at least experiencing open miracles in the temple. You're going to abandon that to assimilate and just abandon the faith? Why would you? But when God disappears, there's no divine presence, there's no prophecy anymore. And even more so, the nations of the world are in charge of us. Right? There's no temple. We're exiled in Germany. Spain, England, America, Russia, the Arab countries. Each country's got their own will, and the Jews have to follow suit. Whatever those countries tell us to do, we're kind of stuck. What can we do now? Right? Maybe we should just assimilate. Yeah, maybe if we marry out, forget the fact that we're Jewish in the first place, maybe they'll treat us better. God says no. Yeah, I promise you I'll never abandon you, even through the exiles. See Leviticus chapter 26, verse 39. Sorry, not 39, 44. Yeah, it says, after all the terrible curses which God tells the Jewish people, that will befall them in times when they abandon God, and the temple will be destroyed. He finishes off with words of consolement. And even so, even with this, when they're in the lands of their enemies, Loi mastim, I will not despise them. V'loi ge'altim, I will not reject them. L'chalisam, to annihilate them. L'hofer brisiatom, to annul my covenant with them. 4 different terms there correspond to the 4 exiles. Ki ani Hashem Elokehem, because I am God, they God. Hashem, I am God, Yukevovke, that's God's name. Elokehem, the one who is there. Elokim, that's the one who judges them, the one who hides from them, who hides in nature. Beautiful. So it's not just despite the darkness, we see a much deeper love between us and God because of the darkness. God tests us and we overcome the darkness. The darkness itself is the highest form of light. It's the Father saying, I don't want to treat you like a child anymore. I want you to stand on your own 2 feet. I'm going. I'll leave Jeeves, my butler, with you for a short time, for 100 odd years, the men of the Great Assembly, Ezra. But then he'll go. You're by yourself now. Let's see what you can do. And through the last couple of thousand years, the Jewish people have been learning the lessons. They're becoming more mature, more resilient, even though they're getting battered down more and more and more, physically, spiritually, until now, unfortunately, the Jewish people, many of them, are hanging on by their fingernails. But still, the Jewish people, the ones who are hanging on, they're thriving, they're learning Torah, they're doing mitzvahs, they're still connecting with God, they're still loyal to God despite 2,000 years of persecutions. You've got missionaries trying to convert us, spending hundreds of millions of dollars every year on different organizations just to convert Jews. Instead of killing Jews, let's be nice to them and try getting them to convert to us. Right? Obviously, people are free will, so it's going to succeed for some people. But the Jewish people as a whole, we're standing firm. That's the light which we can get from Asarah B'Teves, these 3 days of darkness. Despite the fact that our language, we can't be proud of this transcendent language anymore because it's just another language. Especially now, it's just Ivrit, it's another language of a state. Right? Of the state of Israel. It's got its own language. We don't have prophecy anymore. We don't have the ability to see clearly that God is here with the darkness. We just have to have it on faith now. Just the fact that we know historically it was like that, and we can see throughout history God is with us. Right? We don't have that clarity of the unchained Knesset Gadolah, the men of the Great Assembly, and the fact that we don't have the holiness of the land of Jerusalem anymore. Right? The temple is destroyed. The city of Jerusalem, with a lot of holy people in it. Is it a holy city? Bad, with unholy things happening in it? It's hard to say that there's holiness in the city with a lot of idolatry, a lot of other terrible things happening in it. That's not what holy city is meant to be. Even so, despite the fact that we've lost those things, we're still, God's light is illuminating the darkness behind the scenes. Let's finish off. I mentioned there's a second explanation on what this mysterious tragedy which happened on the 9th of Teves was. We said one explanation is that Ezra the Sofer died. Ezra the Scribe died. An amazing story which many people don't know, and will understand why it was hidden. It's to do with Christianity. Right? According to one opinion, right, this is the day that Jesus was born, right? Again, Christianity is taking the religion of Judaism and it's bringing it down into a very crude physical form. We spoke about this in the second of our Lashon Hara lectures we gave a couple of months ago. What is Christianity? It's different from all other religions. All other religions have their own philosophy or their own ideas. Christianity is a very strange religion. It's basically Judaism, but twisted, right? We celebrate the Sabbath. They also celebrate the Sabbath on Sunday, right? They believe in the Torah, right? We believe in the Torah, the Old Testament, as they call it. So yeah, the Torah, of course, but there's another bit which you haven't got yet, the New Testament. Oh, so the corrupt, even though you're not meant to add anything onto the Old Testament in form of a holy book, so to speak, they add onto it. The idea of monotheism. Oh, it's a unique idea in world religions. The Jewish idea of monotheism, just one God, as opposed to the plethora of gods that other religions have. Christians said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. One God. Oh, but it's one God with three parts. So again, what's going on here? Right? You're trying to take a pure idea which was fine by itself, and you're adding on bits to make it look more like other religions. Right? Yeah, so you've got a perfect system which is the Torah, where all the laws work intricately with each other perfectly, and then you add a few other bits on, and then that doesn't work with this now, because that clashes with this, and this clashes with that. It doesn't. Right? The idea of the Mashiach, right? Yeah, we believe in the Messiah, yeah, just like you do, they say. Yeah, the Messiah is, coming to save the world. Yeah. Okay, to usher in the knowledge of God. Yeah, you know what? Messiah is God. 1 minute, what are you talking about? He is God. Where do you get that idea from? Oh, I'm not telling you, right? It's a secret. No one knew about this. Only we know about it, right? But the Jewish people, you're guilty for having blocked ears for not hearing this. The words are clearly there on the page, telling you that that Jesus is the Messiah or whatever. The Messiah is saving the world. He is God, right? Right? But yet at the same time, in the same breath, they say, but Paul says there's a secret which no one knows about, right? It's specific. It's the second coming, right? Because the second coming is the only way you can make sense of it with the verses, because the verses clearly say the Messiah is meant to do A, B, C, D, E, and he didn't do any of them, right? He didn't rebuild the temple. He didn't cause world peace, etc. So Paul says in one of the books, I can't remember which one, that this idea of the second coming, he'll come another time, right? Then he'll fulfill all the prophecies. So how do I know he's the Messiah now? You're saying he's the Messiah because you fulfill the prophecies, but then I look at the prophecies, he didn't fulfill them. No, he's going to. So your whole basis for believing he's the Messiah in the first place is gone. So you're just believing someone for the sake of it, just because you want to. The cult leader, whatever. Very interesting. So you say that is the idea of Christianity, and that was basically the day that Jesus was born. It's this time of year. I mean, I think what they say, this is born the 25th of December. Yeah, so the 9th of Teves is around this time of year. It's tomorrow, which would be the 30th of December this year. Of course, the Hebrew and the English dates fluctuate a bit. Each year, there's 354 days in the lunar year, the Jewish year, and 365 in the solar year. So each year, the Hebrew and the English date are not going to be the same. Every 19 years, they realign. Interesting. I said it's got something to do with Christianity. Okay. Another tragedy happened, according to some people, that happened on the 9th of Teves, is a tragedy of the death of someone called Shimon Kipa, or Shimon HaKalfus. Right? Who is this Shimon HaKalfus? Right? So many people never heard of him, and there's a reason they haven't heard of him. He was a secret tzaddik, a secret sage, right? Very righteous man at the time of around the time of the destruction of the temple, just after the time where Jesus died. and he was none other than St. Peter, what they call St. Peter. Peter was the first bishop of Rome, or the first pope, right? And all the other popes are meant to be standing in the place of Peter, basically, right? So what's going on here? So was he a tzaddik? Was he the first pope? Doesn't sound very good, does it? The idea is that the sages saw that this was going to be a dangerous religion, the Christian religion, and they inserted a couple of righteous people who helped change Christianity in such a way where Jewish people would realize, this is not authentic Judaism anymore, right? So because of the fact that he saved many Jews from following this new cult, right? Because they profess to be genuinely Jewish. If we know about the Ebionites in the early 2nd century, late 1st century, these were followers of Jesus and his apostles, and they were keeping Torah and mitzvahs like all other Jews. It's just they had this idea that he was the Messiah, right? But like adamantly so, and they believed maybe some dodgy things about him as well, which might have been the seed of the idolatrous form of Christianity later on. I'm not an expert in this, but that's the idea anyway. So you see that there were a lot of Jewish people, a significant amount, who were following Jesus, right? The whole thing with the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Essene, all very interesting history there. So, in fact, there was two pupils of Jesus, right? One was called Paul as well, the famous Paul. So again, I don't know. This is just what I've seen brought down. That Paul was actually called Yochanan. I thought he was called Shaul from Tarsus, right? Or Paul from Tarsus, right? And they have Peter, who was actually called Shimon Kipa, right? These were tzaddikim. These were actually righteous people. Amazingly, I always thought that especially Paul was a terrible person, because he's the one who started spreading Christianity to the non-Jews and tried to convert Jews. So I'm not sure where they get Paul from. But that's what I say. I haven't done my research into this too much. So, but anyway, the idea of Shimon Kipa, at least, this is Peter. He started changing Shabbos. He said, Shabbos, let's make Shabbos on the Sunday. The new day of rest is now Sunday, right? Or Paul, he said, you don't have to keep the 613 commandments anymore, right? And he preached to his followers, don't harm the Jews. That's what Peter did, right? He said, yeah, you can have your new religion. It seems to be that it was a very, very fanatical sect, this early Christian sect. Must have been a very powerful, charismatic leader Jesus was, and they were worried that people were going to follow him. So they said, no, don't know how to. So he said, look, I'm the next in the line. I'm the, so to speak, the new leader of the religion. Peter said, right? Obviously, he couldn't annul the religion itself. They just kill him and get someone else. But he started making decrees, and he changed things. Apparently, he wrote the books of the Gospels as well. It's very interesting. This whole idea here. I have to see all the sources for this. I've heard this from a few different places, bits and pieces. I'm just trying to put it all together. Eventually, Shimon Kipa, which Peter, he had these early Christians build a special cave, right, where they brought food to him and everything like that, right? He said he needed a special place to speak with Jesus, and in fact he studied Torah. They told him to bring him kosher food and things like that, and he sent out letters to the different sages showing what was really going on, so they understood what was going on. Right? Eventually, some of the stuff he wrote is actually in our prayers. Very interesting. So, and he was doing open miracles and things like that. So people revered him. So the early Christians basically followed this Peter, right, as the main prophet or whatever, the main conduit into this world, right, of the message of Christianity. And have a look at the words of. Let's have a look here. There was certain parts of the Talmud had been removed by censors, and we had later on we found manuscripts with these extra bits, which usually are talking about Jesus and his history, which were removed obviously by the censors, who were not too keen on people knowing about this. About him being an expert at witchcraft. He went to Egypt. He learned witchcraft in Egypt. The whole story there. He went down with Yeshua ben Parachia, who was the leader of the Jewish people, actually slightly before the time where Jesus lived, interestingly enough. Anyway, but we're quoting Rashi according to the censored sort of refound segments of the Talmud, right, with Rashi's commentary. It says like this: the Gemara states that all the writings and languages of the nations is not from them. This means as follows: all their books of heresy, Yochanan, Paulus, that's Paul, and Petrus, right, that's Peter, I guess, who were Jews, wrote, right? They purposely infected their culture in order to sway the Christian faith away from Judaism. They themselves were not heretics and did so for the benefit of the Jewish people, as is written in the book of Talia Yeshu. Right? Interesting. Yeshu is the name referred to Jesus in the Talmud. Similarly, this refers to the book of Toldos Yeshu, which brings the history of Yeshu from a Jewish perspective and writes how Peter infiltrated the ranks of Yeshu and turned Christianity from being a threat to Judaism. Peter was appointed by the sages to do so. Right? And there's a tradition recorded that this Peter, Shimon Kipa, authored Nishmas. Amazing. This is one of the special prayers we have on the day of the Sabbath, and certain other piyutim which we say in Yom Kippur by all Jews, and the Seder Avodah of Musaf. So very, very holy prayers we have, which were authored by this Peter. Other sources, however, negate the tradition that Peter wrote Nishmas, because there's some other another questionable character wrote it. Apparently, I think it was Elisha ben Avuya, I think, who was one of the greatest sages of the generation, but he became a heretic. He was later on. He was in about the year, must have been after the year 100 or something like that. Okay. Anyway, so that is the hidden secret of the 9th of Teves. This great righteous man, Peter, died. And why did they have to hide it? Because if they would reveal it, then the Christians would realize, hey, you've messed around with our religion. They start persecuting the Jews, right? Especially as Peter told them, don't persecute the Jews, always be good to the Jews, right? And they realize, oh, he just made that up, so we can't persecute the Jews. Furthermore, they realize, oh, the Sabbath should be on Saturday. Oh, we should be keeping the 613 commandments. Right? Because remember, this is a unique religion. It's a religion which professes to be the real Judaism, right? Right? So they had to hide the fact that he died, because they had to hide the fact that this was a righteous person, which was respected by the Jewish sages at the time. So amazing history there. So that is the other reason why we it's an auspicious time, if you want to call it that, to fast on the 9th of Teves. But it's interesting, what's a common theme between all this, whether it's the day when Jesus died or the day when Shimon Kipa died? What's the idea? It's the idea that Christianity is essentially taking, just like the Greeks took the Holy Torah and translated it into a physical, corrupt form, translated it into a language which was intrinsically limited in its ability to express higher concepts. It didn't have that innate characteristic which can explain things on the physical level, but yet still keep its connection to the spiritual root, which the Hebrew language can. Greek and the 70 languages of the 70 nations take that element and cut it out and say, no, it just translates things into just another language. So what Christianity does is does the same thing. It takes Judaism itself and it makes it into another religion. Yeah, other religions have trinities. Yeah, we'll have a trinity as well. Right, you've got your festivals. Yeah, we've got our festivals. It makes Judaism into a... I think you get the idea. It makes it into another religion which has the same sort of flaws as other ones do. It's just it's got its own Jewish flavour. Right? But it's lacking that true monotheism, which one of the main ideas in monotheism is that every human being can have a direct connection with God without any need for an intermediary, which is exactly what Christianity comes to exclude. It says you can only come, one of the books in the New Testament says like this, you can only come to the Father through Jesus, right? That's literally what all forms of idolatry are. People who served idolatry weren't bowing down to mindlessly to objects which they made themselves. They're not stupid. These were just icons to represent higher beings, higher spiritual beings, higher spiritual realities through which God did indeed express his divine flow, his divine energy and his control over the world. The mazolos, we refer to idolatries as avodas kochav mazolos, the ones who serve stars and their constellations. These people who serve the sun, the moon, the stars, what are they doing? They realize they're not stupid. They got it right. God's transmission, his energy does flow through these heavenly luminaries, or through angels, right? Or through demons even, right? There are certain beings which are in contact with God to a greater or lesser extent. The problem with idolatry is you serve them. Is you want to get that energy without going to God. Or you believe you can't get to God. We have to go through, we have to bribe the doorman in order to get into the party. Right? No, why should I bribe? I didn't need to bribe the doorman. The doorman's not in charge. If I'm going to my best friend's party, right, and he can see me at the door, I just wave to him, he'll let me in. Right? But the doorman says, the doorman's here, right? So I'm starting getting fixated about how to deal with the doorman. Let me into the party, it's a great party. But I could just wave to my friend. He's right there. That's the problem with idolatry. You're making an intermediary where you don't need an intermediary. And it's serious. Because you're recognizing another power outside of God. And that defeats the whole purpose of us transforming ourselves to being like God. If we're transforming ourselves to being like God's not the only necessary being, right? Because you've got other intermediaries which are necessary. Therefore, we're transforming ourselves to be similar to a being which is not the ultimate being, right? And the whole purpose is that we transform ourselves to being like God, so we become as infinite as possible in the world to come. As we explained at length in the very first lecture on the channel, as usual, we mentioned that. So that's the problem with idolatry, and that's the problem with Christianity, is it takes the Judaism, the ideas of Judaism, and it brings it down to another religion. It takes the immense light of Judaism, which is our connection with God, our direct connection with God, without any need for any stops along the way. And he said, no, but you need Jesus, though. Or you need, if you're Hindu, then you need whatever. I don't want to say the name of their the idols, because it's actually proper idolatry names. But Jesus is just his physical name. The C word is more of a idolatrous name, right? So the Hindus have the same thing. The old Egyptian gods had this, right? The idea that connecting with the ultimate being through intermediaries. So, but there is a silver lining to all of this. Because remember we said that the message of Chanukah is to show that it isn't despite the darkness that we see a new light, yeah? It's because of the darkness we see a new light. We see a new layer, a deeper, more profound, more subtle layer of our connection with Hashem. So just like we see that we don't need the prophecy of the Jewish language to have that perception of reality, that we understand how God created the world, because we understand the essence of the Jewish language. We don't have that anymore once it was translated and equivocated to other languages. The fact is that through us working in the Jewish, learning Torah with the Hebrew language now, we still see the beauty of the Hebrew language through our own intellect. We don't feel it as sort of the Hebrew letters are beaming their glory into our face and into our minds. Wow, amazing. It's something which you can't argue with. No, it's something which you have to work on, and you appreciate, oh wow, the precision in the language of this verse here. That letter was not necessary, but you see, when you compare it with this verse over here, which is similar, but it's got an extra letter, that letter makes a world of difference, and you have a whole, and you just get dumbfounded by the beauty of the Torah and the precision of the letters of the Torah. So we're seeing God through the darkness, right? Because we don't, it's obvious, the Torah is obviously holy, it's obviously the word of God, right? So no. God says, I'm not going to let you see that. You've got to work on it. You've got to get it yourself, right? Ezra dying, right? That means you don't get prophecy anymore. You don't get to see how through the Torah you can reach prophecy, right? Because you've got a living example of someone who teaches you this idea, that teaches you that God is here in the darkness, who's great and mighty and awesome even in the darkness. He's dead now. You've got to internalize that yourself. You've got to go through 2,000 years of exile and then see it with your own eyes. Read world history. See that God's been looking after us the whole time. He's just been here. He's just been hiding. It's a new light which comes from the darkness. New light which comes from the darkness of the destruction of the temple. Again, same idea. But now we've got another one, right? Where do we see the light in this Christian religion? Could we have done better without it? First of all, this is the religion which out of all religions has been trying to destroy Judaism for millennia. It's been persecuting Jews, killing Jews, get rid of the Jews. It's not working. Force them to convert. We're not forcing them. The forcing them to convert doesn't work either. Their trust and faith in God and the promise He had with them not to abandon them is so strong. That gets revealed now because of all the persecutions and the forced conversions. Doesn't matter. Forced conversions, they're still keeping everything, right? Okay. Let's try one last tactic. Instead of forcing them, let's be their friend. Let's be nice to them. Say, yes, of course, the Jewish people were not rejected, right? But there may be a partnership with the Christians. Very dangerous. There might be some truth in that, but it's so subtle that most people who are not knowledgeable will fall into the trap. Say, oh, okay, Judeo-Christian values, beautiful ideas, yeah. But actually, no, they're just Jewish values. The Christians just took the good bits, right, and the bad bits of the Christian values, they just, they're not there. If you look at all the Judeo-Christian values, you see they're actually just Jewish values, right? I don't think you'll see any inventions of Christianity specifically over Judaism where we see those values elevated above Judaism. I don't know. You can leave in the comments if you want to argue with that. So they're trying convincing the Jewish people that no, we'll do it together. You don't have to convert. We won't force you to convert, but of course it's better if you do become a more fulfilled Jew if you do. So okay, the pressure's off now. Okay, they're not forcing us, but okay, they're quite nice people. Let's listen to what they've got to say, and then slowly the poison infects the person. Eventually, he starts thinking, "Oh, this is actually they've got some very good moral, ethical teachings." Well, usually that happens to the ignorant Jews who don't realize these teachings, which are so inspiring in Christianity. Just look at the Torah; they're there. Very sad story I heard once. Two stories. I think it was two people who came to a rabbi who had converted to Christianity, and they asked them what caused you to convert. One of them said, very briefly, not going through the whole story, one of them said, I saw this verse and I just knew it was the truth, right? And you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. Beautiful, right? Hear, O Israel, the God is our Lord, God is one. It's so beautiful, such inspiring, amazing, right? And wow, what is this? Oh, it's in the Christian Bible, right? In Deuteronomy. That's cheating. That's our book. That's a Jewish Torah, right? So, but purely out of complete ignorance, they didn't realize, because they never learnt Torah. They were ignorant Jews. They didn't realize it was actually purely a Jewish verse. It wasn't even in the New Testament plagiarizing the Old Testament. It was literally the Old Testament, the Torah. I think another one. Was that the other one? I can't remember. One of them was Hear, Israel. The other one might have been You should love the Lord your God. Yeah, anyway. And still, yet Jews are still resisting. Even ones who did believe their lies. The more they study, the ones who take the study seriously, so many of them have come back and realize, oh, we've been lied to. That doesn't work. Okay, what you told me originally sounded convincing, but once I really have the conviction for this new religion I found, and I really want to learn it really well, oh, 1 minute. How can you say that when the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Leviticus says completely not like this? There's a clear contradiction between the Old and New Testament now. Oh, how do you understand? I'll go to my pastor, and the pastor says, don't ask questions, or they give answers. That's not good enough, that answer. It's better not ask. Just don't ask. It's faith, right? Eventually, that's what they fall back on. And yeah, and Jewish people coming back to Judaism through studying the Christian religion. Right? They're showing however much you want to make another religion similar to Judaism, right? The slightest difference can be enough to reveal that Judaism is the true religion from Hashem, and there's no reason to add on to it at all. But there's another element as well. The Rambam says, why are the two major world religions, Christianity and Islam, yeah, they both come from Judaism? Amazing. Right? God's telling us, right? He's telling us, even though I've abandoned you, I'm going to make the non-Jews serve me, even though I want to keep the darkness facade going. So obviously it has to be either idolatry or a false testimony, right? There has to be a trinity, some sort of corruption there, or it has to be a new book, or the Quran, which rejects the Old Testament. right? There has to be some sort of corruption. But ultimately, you see, 1 minute, God, you're making it a bit easy for us to see what's going on here. Basically, Judaism is true, your original message is true, and you're making these two opposite religions follow it in some way, and half the world's population follows Judaism essentially, just in the corrupt form. So why not go back to the source and see what the Jews say? So, ironically, through Christianity and Islam, that can actually bring people back to Judaism, right? And the Rambam says, the Maimonides says that, why did God let these religions happen? Because imagine we're coming to a time when the Messiah is going to come, and the truth of the one God's going to be revealed in the world. Imagine you go to someone in, like, let's say, Samoa or the Congo, right? And the news of the Messiah has come, and God's been revealed. They won't know what on earth you're talking about. What was it? You mean? What do you mean God? You mean Habubu or Chaluki or whatever, right? These different idols which they serve. They don't know what you're talking about. The way they look at the world is, this is the real world, and this world lasts forever. We just got to deal with the idols, make sure we're on the good side. So Judaism teaches the world that there's an end point to the world. There's a purpose to the world. There's an end point. The world's not going mindlessly on forever. God only put us in this world in order to temporarily test us and make us grow and perfect ourselves. Ultimately, this has to be brought to a head, because the purpose of this world is not to forever live in a physical world. It's to transcend the world, become like God, and become transcendent beings ourselves, the whole of mankind. Like in the first lecture on the channel. So, God says, I feel bad for all these non-Jews who decide to be idolatrous. I want them to be part of the final picture somehow. So you know what? I'll teach them Judaism. But in a way where I'm not going to overpower them. They still have to have their free will. Those who see, I'll bring them to the doorstep. If you bring the horse to water, we can't make it drink. I'll bring these idolatrous people, these people influenced by Greek philosophy, I'll bring them closer to the truth, which is Judaism, but I'll leave a bit out. Yeah, there's only one God and the Torah is true. But I'll let them play about with the idea of a Trinity, or the idea of a New Testament, or the idea of Messiah not just being a holy person who's subjugated to God, but someone who is God. I let them play about with those crazy ideas, or the idea that there's one God, totally one God, not made up of parts, but there's one more prophet which is not included, and he completely turns everything upside down into an immoral religion where lust and the physical desire is actually what God wants from us, as opposed to transcending the desires of the body. That's the other religion we mentioned earlier, right? The one which their world to come is a very, very physical, lust-based paradise, if you want to call it that. Yeah, 72 virgins. Well, there's 72 mothers-in-law. Not sure how much people are going to enjoy that part, but anyway. You see, what's going on now is now all the non-Jews in the world are familiar with the Jewish ideals, the ideology of Judaism. The only problem is that they've got a few things wrong. Now, when the Messiah reveals himself, they say, okay, Messiah, good, yeah, monotheism. Oh, you're right, monotheism means literally one, not one which is three. Or, oh yeah, God communicates, created the world and everything. Oh, and the Torah is the Torah which you have now. It didn't get forgotten. Okay, Albert. And it's only a small step which has to be taken for the non-Jews once the Messiah comes. So, in one way you could say that's what's going here on the 9th of Teves. If you say this was the birth of Jesus, or where they say it's the death of Shimon Kipa, St. Peter, right? It's because they brought the idea of Christianity to the world, and now it makes more sense why Paul spread the word of Christianity to the world. Maybe he had in mind that, of course, I want to make it clearly a religion which is not Judaism, so maybe if I bring more non-Jews into it, then the Jews are going to be absolutely clear this is not Judaism, where you've got 10 times the number of people who do all these weird things, not having circumcision, not keeping the commandments, right? Pretty clear, okay, there's us and there's them now. It's a separation. Okay. But because they brought this Judaism and Judaism plus, if you want to put it like that, in a way, they're starting the process of the perfection of the non-Jewish world. The non-Jewish world now has access to God as well, where they were stuck in idolatry beforehand, but now the world of darkness, which is a world of idolatry, and the non-Jews who served idols until then, now they've got access to the light as well. So maybe that's the idea of the silver lining, the light in the darkness, which is on the 9th of Teves. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'd like to thank my brother-in-law Shlomi for helping me arrange this lecture and speak out the ideas. I hope you enjoyed it, and please leave any toxic comments in the comment section as usual, and I'll be happy to try addressing any of the sources of the ideas I had today, or answering any ideas or challenges to it. But I think the ideas speak for themselves, and they're beautiful ideas. Okay, and so fast well, everyone.